Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. Today we'll be discussing on another odd topic, but once in a while you will see such patient in your everyday practice. We call superior vena cava syndrome or superior vena cava occlusion, or another word commonly utilized is obstruction. So superior vena cava syndrome or superior vena cava occlusion or superior vena cava obstruction. You can see here, you can clearly see the dilated veins over the chest, upper part of the neck and chest. This is very peculiar. Plus you get edema of the face. This is edema of the face. You can see good amount of edema of the face. You can see dilated veins. These are the two characteristic signs which should suggest that there is obstruction to superior vena cava. So whenever there is an obstruction to the blood flow in superior vena cava, it will result in a group of symptoms and signs we call as a superior vena cava syndrome. This is because of external compression or invasion or constriction. The most common cause is thrombosis of superior vena cava. It may be partial or complete. Because of this occlusion, there is an increased venous pressure which results in edema of the face, neck, arm, that is a draining area, and upper part of the chest. Because there is an obstruction, blood cannot enter via superior vena cava into RA. So there will be dilated veins over the chest which will have blood flow from above downwards, which will be draining towards inferior vena cava territory. Because pleural space and pericardial space also drains into this venous system, you will have collection of fluid in a pleural cavity and pericardial sac. We call pleural effusion and pericardial effusions. Because the venous drainage of the brain, which drains into superior sagittal sinus, into lateral sinus, and then into internal jugular vein, because this finally drains into superior vena cava, even that drainage is affected. So it will result into raised intracranial pressure because of collection of CSF in the intracranial space in a skull cavity, and also there will be cerebral edema. Indirectly, this is the entire picture which we will come across in case of superior vena cava syndrome. So depending upon the different pathophysiology and onset, etc., either you get a partial occlusion or complete occlusion. It can be iatrogenic or non-iatrogenic. The most common cause is iatrogenic, very frequently because of catheters, central venous lines, or pacemaker wires, etc., because those are commonly introduced through internal jugular vein into right side of the heart, right heart catheterization, etc. Those are all iatrogenic causes which can end up with superior vena cava thrombus formation and occlusion. There are some causes which are non-iatrogenic, and that occlusion can be partial or complete. Non-iatrogenic can produce compression from outside like malignancy, particularly very common superior mediastinal malignancy. It can be following a radiation or following a traumatic injury while doing some procedures. By and large, they are all of slow onset, but in some condition you can have an acute onset of compression of superior vena cava. There are different classification done by different groups of people. There is an anatomical classification, clinical classification, and operative risk classification. If you are interested, you can go through. Usually, we are always interested in clinical classification and risk classification. Say, as for example, in a risk classification, which is given the name Bixby, that is no dyspnea at rest, no facial cyanosis in upright position, no change in dyspnea or worsening of the facial edema and cyanosis during supine position. These are usually low risk patient, and high risk patient will present with facial cyanosis, dyspnea at rest in sitting position. So this is one important which gives you a little clue regarding the severity and operative risk. Regarding clinical classification, grade 0 is asymptomatic. Grade 1 is mild plethora cyanosis of head and neck edema. Grade 2 is moderate changes with little amount of functional impairment. Grade 3 is severe involvement, that is mild and moderate plus cerebral and laryngeal edema, limited cardiac reserves. And grade 4 is life threatening where you get cardiac failure, and grade 5 is described as a fatal. Well, this is anatomical, which part of the superior vena cava draining area is affected. Accordingly, it is classified into type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. By and large, according to anatomical classification, which is being diagnosed on venography, in type 1, 90% stenosis of supraazygous superior vena cava, then 90%, more than 90% type 2, complete occlusion of superior vena cava with azygous reverse blood flow, that is type 3, and complete occlusion of superior vena cava with involvement of major tributaries and azygous vein is called type 4. These are all the diagrams showing you type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 variety. I am not going into detail regarding that part. This is what we have told you, clinical classification grade 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. I have already given you the description. This is Bixby, low risk and high risk. Etiology wise, iatrogenic is the most common, and that iatrogenic cause very frequently will result into thrombosis. The most common cause is central venous line pacemakers plus even right side catheterization, ICD, TPN, etc. There are a lot of procedures which are done through internal jugular veins, even CV lines. You can have external compression by tumor. The most common tumor is Pancoast tumor. Or you can have infiltration of superior vena cava by malignant tumor which is spreading. Traumatic injury while doing a procedures can also result into the damage to the endothelium of internal jugular and superior vena cava and can finally end up with thrombosis. In mediastinal damage, which produces mediastinitis and inflammation, secondary to that inflammation, you can have involvement of superior vena cava and you can end up with occlusion. And whenever a person undergoes radiotherapy, secondary to mediastinal tumors or breast carcinoma or bronchogenic carcinoma, etc., esophageal carcinoma, so we call mediastinal structures and lung malignancy, they can end up with fibrosis and can end into superior vena cava occlusion. So malignancy is the most common cause. Another is pacemaker wires, fibrosing mediastinitis, central venous catheters, pacemaker wires. These are common iatrogenic groups, and post radiation. These are common. These are the most common causes leading to superior vena cava obstruction. If you go through the malignant causes, mainly lung malignancy will be including these two, will be nearly 75%. That is non-small cell carcinoma and small cell carcinomas. This is accounting for nearly 75% of the groups. Lymphoma is another group which is accounting for 12% average, highest is 25%. Occasionally there can be secondary metastasis from the distant tissues. Thymomas is rare and other malignancy. There are some benign causes also which can involve superior vena cava, like infectious disease, that is tuberculosis, syphilis, aspergillosis, filariasis, etc. You can have a thrombosis secondary due to non-neoplastic groups. Certain lymphadenopathy can also produce compression from outside like sarcoidosis, Behçet's. Rarely aortic aneurysm, occasionally even substernal thyroid goiter, enlarged goiter. You can have a pericardial cyst or thymic cyst or a bronchogenic cyst occasionally. But iatrogenic comes topmost on the list, where either you have got a pacemaker wires or defibrillator wires, ICD wires, catheters, central venous catheters, right heart catheterizations, TPN line, central venous lines, etc. So TPN line, Swan gas catheter, that is right heart catheterization, then pacemaker, implantation wires, etc. are the highest groups in iatrogenic. Whether it is because of thrombus formation or because of external compression, that is external compression by tumors or invasion by tumors, or fibrosis, that is mediastinitis, or thrombosis because of iatrogenic groups, it can end up with partial or complete occlusion. And depending upon the site, which portion, say this is innominate, this is left internal jugular, this is right internal jugular, this is right subclavian, this is left subclavian, this is brachiocephalic, this is azygous vein. So depending upon where the obstruction is, if the obstruction is close to right atrium, all this drainage, right side as well as left side drainage, will be affected, and you will end up with an extensive symptoms and signs. Partial occlusion, you might have a partial drainage of one of the system. If it is close to azygous, it will produce certain symptoms and signs related to pericardium as well as pleural effusion, etc. While this drains the head and neck, this drains right upper extremity, this drains left upper extremity. So depending upon which portion is involved, accordingly you will have symptoms and signs. This is right brachiocephalic and this will be left brachiocephalic. So this is one picture which is being shown. If there is an occlusion here, you will have a partial drainage. You can see there is a partial drainage from here via this intercostal veins into right atrium. But if there is a blockage here, all this drainage will be azygous drains, etc. will be affected. You can see here. Now if this is blocked, azygous drainage will be blocked. You will have a big dilated veins draining subclavian via internal memory into superior epigastric and inferior epigastric and finally into inferior vena cava. So a big dilated vein over the chest and abdomen, and blood flow will be from above downwards. Here you can see that if there is an occlusion here, you get this from azygous vein into lumbar and then into inferior vena cava. So depending upon that, there is a classification. I am not going to detail regarding this drainage system. So you can see that there will be dilated veins over the chest draining the drainage from either the two upper limbs, head and neck, into inferior vena cava territory. So it will lead to increased venous pressure And because of that increased venous pressure, there will be edema of the head, neck, both upper limb and upper part of the chest. Dilated veins over the chest, pleural and pericardial effusion, cerebral edema, raised intracranial pressure, and even papilledema. So clinical features will depend upon the severity of occlusion, site of occlusion, and partial or complete. So diagnosis is made by history, physical examination, and you will require to find out where is the occlusion. So it will depend on degree of occlusion, how fast it develops, and presence or absence of collaterals. Almost in 70% of the group of people you will get this thoracic vein dilated, neck vein will be distended almost in 60%, you will have facial swelling in almost 50% of the group, you will have edema of the upper part of the chest in almost 40%, and you might see even cyanosis in 15% of the group of people. Very frequently they develop shortness of breath, chest pain, cough, and dysphagia. You can see almost in 50% there is a shortness of breath, chest pain in almost 20% of group, cough, chest pain, and dysphagia in almost 20%. Edema of head, neck, arms, and upper part of the chest is the most common finding which you will come across. And when there is a severe occlusion, you will come across raised intracranial pressure and cerebral edema. Also, if there is an occlusion of the main part of the superior vena cava, there will be big dilated veins over the chest as well as abdomen. And you will also come with pleural effusion and pericardial effusion when azygous vein is being affected. So if you come across the common symptoms, that is facial puffiness, this is the most common symptom you will come across, almost in 80%, dyspnea in 63%, persistent cough in almost 24 to 55% of the group of people, congestion and edema of neck and upper limbs in 50%, chest pain is 20%, dysphagia is also in around 20%, syncope is not a common symptom, occasionally in 7% of the group, orthopnea is not a common symptom, hoarseness of voice is also not a common symptom, periorbital edema, deafness, somnolence, nasal stuffiness, pleural effusion, and pericardial effusions. While least common symptoms are stridor, lethargy, dizziness, epistaxis, hemoptysis, and confusion. All these are secondary due to increased venous pressure. Superior vena cava wall does not offer resistance to compression. Hence, lumen reduction is greater than. So, hemodynamic changes will take place if there is an occlusion or compression of which is occluding almost 60%. You will have a draining area dilatation, that is we call proximal dilatation, congestion, and blood flow will be sluggish. This is represented by cyanosis because of venous stasis and edema of upper part of the chest, upper limbs, neck, and face. This is the most prominent symptom, And because of venous stasis, you might see little amount of cyanosis also, even in presence of normal PaO2. Swelling is usually most important on the right side because of better possibility of collateral circulation on left brachiocephalic vein compared to right side. And you will have a varicose vein also seen in the proximal tongue, and dark purple ear are also typical. Cough, epistaxis, hemoptysis, all these are secondary due to venous congestion. Dysphagia, dysphonia, hoarseness of voice, all these are because of venous congestion. And you can have even bleeding from esophagus and even in retinal and conjunctival bleeding. That is all because of increased venous pressure. Venous distension in the neck is the most common findings which you can come across almost in 66%. over the chest in almost 54% of the group. You can see these dilated veins which are not normally present. Lower half of the body will be relatively pale. Engorged abdominal vein, particularly if there is a complete occlusion of superior vena cava. You can have a papilledema, raised intracranial pressure can produce stupor and even coma because of cerebral edema. And cyanosis and edema will be aggravated by horizontal position, means when the person goes to supine posture, person will have a increased edema and cyanosis, which will be partially relieved by upright posture. Physical examination is often crucial. You will see facial edema, neck edema, puffiness of the face, distended vein. You can see here dilated veins. You can see a distended veins over the chest, etc. You can see this is superior vena cava syndrome, classically seen in a person with bronchogenic carcinoma. What is seen is swelling of his face first early in the morning, this, and as he acquires an erect posture, resolution of after being in upright during a daytime. So because of gravity, there is a decreased blood flow, and hence you will have little decrease in the puffiness of the face. And in supine posture, the edema will increase and there will be appearance of even cyanosis. So when cephalic venous system is affected, it will give rise to headache, dizziness, drowsy, etc. And person can be stupor, lethargy, and even coma can be there secondary because of cerebral edema. Headache is very common symptom because of again cerebral edema and raised intracranial pressure. Epilepsy has been occasionally reported as psychosis, probably due to carbon dioxide accumulation. Not a common finding but can be present. Dyspnea is very commonly mainly because of mediastinal mass, pleural effusion and cardiopulmonary impairment. Supine position will worsen the clinical picture as far as cardiovascular system is concerned. This already we have shown you where is the occlusion. Depending upon that, you will have draining areas affected. Type 1, there is a narrowing of a supraazygous superior vena cava occlusion. It will be at this level. Type 2 will be little below, where it will be more than 90%. Type 3 is complete superior vena cava occlusion. This complete occlusion. And now there is a reverse blood flow. And type 4, complete occlusion. Now you get development of the major tributaries. All tributaries are being affected, and you will have a big collaterals over the chest and over the abdomen draining into inferior vena cava. So blood flow will be from above downwards. Investigations are mainly to find out the etiology and severity of obstruction. So history and physical examination is very important to find out the evidence of superior vena cava obstruction. Chest X-ray will try to help you to rule out mediastinal pathophysiology which is producing compression. Duplex ultrasound is very useful to find out the site of obstruction. CT, MRI and MRI venography will be very important to find out the severity of occlusion plus collaterals. And you can go for what we call as bronchoscopy, thoracotomy or thoracocentesis to find out the etiology and go for biopsy to find out malignant, non-malignant, etc. So first is localization of obstruction. There is one test called as the exercise test where patient opens and closes his fist forcefully for 1 minute while venous pressure reading are being noted. In normal individual it remains constant, but in superior vena cava obstruction pressure will rise more than 10 centimeter or more and gradually recedes to normal as you stop that. Also you can apply lower chest tourniquet test which is to find out superior vena cava obstruction. Radiological investigation like chest X-ray, CT, MRI and MRI venography. Ultrasound, Doppler, color duplex is important, and you can go for radioisotope studies to find out malignancy. Biopsy, lymph node biopsy, sputum, pleural fluid cytology, or any nodes which is being seen, or any mediastinal pathophysiology, you can go for biopsy. May be done by bronchoscopy or transbronchial biopsy. Even thoracocentesis or sometime even thoracotomy can be used to get biopsy. Ultrasonography is a bedside procedure which is very useful to find out the severity of occlusion, site of occlusion, etc. And it will also give you idea regarding how extensive is the occlusion by duplex study. Chest X-ray, we have told you that it will give you a roughly mediastinal pathophysiology, but it does not give you where exactly is the occlusion. So mediastinal widening will help you that there is possibility of some mediastinal tumors, particularly malignancy, presence of pleural effusion, right hilar mass, cardiomegaly, if there is a calcified lymph nodes or there is a granulomatous disorders. If you take a lateral view, you can find out the mediastinal mass, etc. So you'll be able to find out, say in this picture, you can see a huge mediastinal mass. This is most likely to be malignancy, or even sometime it can be even in case of aortic aneurysms, bronchogenic carcinoma, etc. There is one typical sign which is being described as aortic nipple. So you can see a small nipple like shadow. This is very frequently because of venous collaterals. CT scan is most useful to find out the site of occlusion. Probably the etiology also can be suspected from CT scan. So CT scan gives you much better idea regarding mediastinal syndromes, different mediastinal pathophysiologies. You can take advantage of contrast venography, which will give you extent and site of obstruction, degree of obstruction, patency of superior vena cava, how much it is patent or completely occluded, collateral vessels, and degree of venous distension also can be identified by MRI with venography. So venography gives lot of idea regarding where is the occlusion, severity, extent, collaterals, etc. can be identified very easily. And depending upon the venographic classification, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, you can utilize, and that can be taken an advantage during surgical interventions. You can also go for radionucleotide venography, which will give you an idea regarding again extent of venous occlusion. This we already discussed, and you can take an advantage of CT guided or MRI guided biopsy. CT guided biopsy, or even you can go for mediastinoscopy, transbronchial biopsy can be also done. So you can take an advantage of percutaneous transthoracic CT guided biopsy, thoracocentesis, thoracoscopy biopsy, thoracotomy, mediastinoscopy, or even nowadays we call EBUS, that is endobronchial transthoracic biopsy, ultrasound guided biopsy. Mainly you will have to find out whether it is partial or complete, iatrogenic or non-iatrogenic, traumatic, radiation, etc. What is the probable etiology, severity, and depending on that, you will have a management. So depending on the underlying conditions, you will have to decide regarding what should be the treatment. These are all the different conditions which are being there and what you utilize. Most common cause is malignancy, which is non-iatrogenic. So if there is a malignancy, radiotherapy, chemotherapy is the most common. If there is a thrombus formation, thrombolytic, anticoagulants. In good number of conditions, you can use stents also in case of partial occlusions. Balloon angioplasty can be also utilized and you can use endovascular stents. And you might require even bypass grafting. As far as medical treatment is concerned, thrombolysis, anticoagulants, diuretic and glucocorticoid use is one of the common thing which you can utilize. Among malignancy, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or in case of a major occlusion or complete occlusion, even bypass grafting. And now there is a very good facilities available of minimal invasive endovascular treatment like endovascular stenting and balloon angioplasty, which can be combined with thrombolysis. So you can combine thrombolysis with angioplasty and stent replacement. This is a very useful, minimal invasive, least traumatic and less complications. Conservative treatment mainly is by medical treatment, and in case of malignancy, chemotherapy and radiotherapy. While in emergency, glucocorticoid and diuretics are very frequently utilized if a person clinically there is an evidence of cerebral edema or there is a decreased cardiac output or if there is an upper airway edema like laryngeal edema. So in those cases, for emergency purpose, glucocorticoid and diuretic therapies. These are the flow charts or algorithm which are being utilized particularly in case of a malignant superior vena cava syndromes. So you want to find out the types of malignancy, how severe the malignancy, and depending upon that you can decide regarding surgical intervention, chemoradiotherapy intervention, or poor treatment which is being there. So depending upon that you can go for. So if you are interested at your leisure time you can go through. This is another flow charts where you can decide regarding different therapy in case of malignancy, what are those different malignancy, and whether you want to go for a stent or you want to have only supportive treatment where person is non-operative, etc. You can see here the person was having a puffiness of face, you can see congestions, edema of the face, edema of the neck, chest wall, hardly you can make out clavicle, etc. And you got a dilated veins. Now what was being done was dilatation with stenting being done. Stent is put here and you can see the results. Now edema is subsided, you can clearly see the clavicles, you can see muscles, neck muscles, you can see clearly those dilated veins which were there over the chest, edema is subsided. This will be dramatic results. Usually following those procedures, common complications will be infection, pulmonary embolism, stent migration, hematoma, bleeding, perforation or rupture of superior vena cava, etc. And as a late complication, you can have a bleeding and sometimes person can die from anticoagulation because of bleeding. Or it can be stent failure because of re-occlusion. So you can see here there is a severe superior vena cava occlusion. You dilate and then put the stent, you get results. And that another treatment is surgical bypass. Usually very rarely this is being required, particularly in an extensive occlusion of superior vena cava. So commonest complication which are risky complication or with high mortality is raised intracranial pressure and cerebral edema. You can have a pericardial effusion, which can produce certain complications. Pleural effusion can also. The another group of complication is because of the basic etiology like malignancy, mediastinal malignancy, which itself can produce compression of the trachea, esophagus, surrounding structures, etc. You can have a pulmonary embolism, and good number of time you can have a death. So I end my lecture here. I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable. I appreciate you for spending some of the time with me. I think once in a while, if you see such patients who has got puffiness of face with dilated veins over the chest, close to the shoulder and upper part of the chest, do suspect superior vena cava occlusion. And good number of time, it is iatrogenic because of placement of pacemaker wires, following a right heart catheterizations, TPN lines, central venous lines, etc. There are good number of procedures which are done through internal jugular, and that can end up with thrombus formation and can produce occlusions. And most commonly, it is a right internal jugular which is being utilized. Occasionally, it can be secondary due to compression from outside like tumors, particularly mediastinal tumors, that is Pancoast tumor, bronchogenic carcinoma, esophageal malignancies, lymphomas, etc. So do keep it in mind, you can see such patients. And if you pick up those cases early, you can give a good results. So I end my lecture here. I hope this lecture may be helpful to you in future.